So let's close our eyes to begin with. Taking a nice, slow, deep breath. Slow breath out. So today we've been talking about these two identities that we all have. One of those identities is, what comes to mind is our street identity. You know, it's the face that we show to the world. It's who we want the world to believe that we are. It could, in many, I would almost say in most of us, be that person who wants to fit in. It's that part of ourself that would prefer to play nice, to be nice, to not ruffle feathers, not create waves, to maintain the peaceful nature of the group. Then we have that other part of ourself. In that context, that positive way I just framed this first identity would almost seem like it's a negative thing, and yet it's not. The second identity is the higher identity. In the words of Abraham Maslow, famous psychologist, the self-actualized human is he who is independent of the good opinion of others. Not from the standpoint of being a narcissist, not from the standpoint of my way or the highway, not from the standpoint of I'm going to walk over you if you don't allow me to get my way, but from the standpoint of being independent of the good opinion of others, when the good opinion of others are not in the best interests of all. When we're afraid to not speak up when there's wrongdoing. When we're concerned that if we do speak up, that we may suffer consequences. Whether that's at our job, simply asking for a raise when we believe we deserve a raise, taking the risk that we'll get a no. If we use that same job analogy to speaking up in a situation where our company is doing something that is not right, either bookkeeping wise or environmentally speaking, being that so-called whistleblower. In our government, it's the same exact thing. That lower self, that more street self, if we're a politician, as an example, who's only concerned about what the voters will think, versus that higher self takes extraordinary consciousness, awareness, to go against what appears to be our own self-interest. In the case of a whistleblower, losing your job. In the case of what we're talking about with a politician, losing your position. And yet, we're talking about two different self-interests, either lower self-interests, that which is much more earthly, much more ego-bound, much more fear-oriented, versus that higher self-interest, which both Abraham Maslow and Lawrence Kohlberg, two very famous psychologists, talked in different ways how one of the highest levels for all of us is being willing to stand up against the law of the land, when the law of the land, whether we're talking about inside of a corporation, inside of the government, inside of our family, when that law of the land is unjust, when it's against literally the universal principles of love and trust and faith and grace and compassion and gratitude, and instead is based in judgment and fear and self-interest and indifference. So you find those rare people in society, as Cap, who is on our calls, worked with Nelson Mandela, would say, Mandela, it's 1 in 10 million, 1 in 100 million. To be able to buck the system. There were a lot of people bucking the system, but to actually have even that higher self that could still look compassionately upon his adversaries, see the human side in them, and ultimately create harmony in the country after extraordinary adversity. 50 years of struggle in his life as a member of the African National Congress, 26, 27 years in jail. His family being repressed, him not being able to attend the funeral of his son who died when he was in jail. The amount of bloodshed and wounds that he had from unfulfilled expectations, how long things took. And yet when he finally came to power, 92, 93, 94, 1992, 93, 94, how he was able to reconcile and to give equal voice to those who had been the oppressors of his people for so long. So when we speak about the two identities, there's actually many more than two, but we have, just for the sake of simplicity, that lower identity that's interested in self-protection, interested in protecting our family. Not to say that the person who has the higher identity is not either, but it's not at the expense of others. It's let's figure out the solution. Let's figure out something that will work for all of us. As is said in the Declaration of Independence of America, all men were created equal. There are many things unequal, so that may seem a fallacy, but what is equal is that we all have these, quote, inalienable rights. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We all are expressions, individual expressions of that higher power, that divinity. And so our higher self, that higher identity that we have, is forever reaching to be a better expression of that, to express acceptance and love rather than judgment, to express grace and gratitude rather than indifference and expectation and entitlement, to express trust rather than fear. And that's further expressed in our actions by, do we create more and more walls in our life and in our relationships and those who don't fit into our side, our team, our culture, our country? Or do we have what we used to refer to in the United States as picket fences? Beautiful analogy. I always love that image of picket fences because it defines, in a very realistic term, what is mine, and yet it's a barrier that can be crossed and talked across, and it's a gentle acknowledgement of our human side. And yet at the same time, what's so beautiful is it opens up a doorway to that higher side. We all live in different bodies. We all are incredibly, phenomenally, inconceivably different from one another. Who our parents were, what country we grew up in, what state, what neighborhood, who were our teachers, what had our parents experienced that affected the way they raised us, who were our friends, how much education did we have, what was our education in. Did we work for ourselves or did we work for others? Or were we unemployed? Or did we not have to work at all? What did we work at? How hard and demanding were the people that we had to work with? So many, literally an infinite number of factors that ultimately make each of us into who we are. So there are differences, but do we celebrate those differences as does that higher identity, that higher self? Or do we rail against them as the lower identity tends to do, wanting to build walls, build boundaries, keep you on your side and me on my side, take as much as I can for our side and be indifferent to what everybody else on the other side might need. We are not perfectly one identity. We're not perfectly that higher identity. We were born with this body, with this nervous system, with this background, with these infinite number of synapses created by these 100 million neurons in our brain, each which can connect in such an infinite variety of patterns with other neurons, which is to say, we each are connected to different thoughts, to different experiences, to a different past, to literally a different vessel that we were given. Some of us were designed to be great scientists and geniuses. Others were designed to be great athletes. Others were designed to be great givers, great mothers, great fathers, great doormen, great gardeners. But within the context of that body and that nervous system, how much can we surrender of our past? How much can we be free to appreciate and celebrate and take into consideration all others? This is what that higher self, that higher identity, is tasked to do. A never-ending journey that's so easy to slip into that lower identity, that self-righteous, self-protective, self-justifying identity. A good first step is what we're doing here, acknowledging and understanding there are those two natures. An even more important step is really culturing that higher nature. And having a lot of forgiveness for ourselves. And how challenging it is on this planet to maintain that higher nature. Which is all about forgiveness for others and forgiveness for ourselves, not forgetting the forgiveness of ourselves when we're less than that which we envision ourselves what we should be. And not forgetting to be playful and childlike at times as well, and have fun. It could all become too serious sometimes as well. And that can affect our ability to stay in that higher realm. It's all this wonderful balancing act, this wonderful cake with so many different ingredients. But we know when we're getting it right. Others can feel it, they can taste it, they can smell it, literally smell it. From a pure physiological standpoint, that lower state is ruled by cortisol, stress hormone from our amygdala. Those higher states ruled more by serotonin and dopamine. And we all literally smell the pheromones. This is scientific research. So whether we think it, we're showing it or not, the level of fear, the level of cortisol, the level of dopamine, or the level of serotonin is perceptible on a very tangible, not only spiritual level, there's all sorts of levels, but literally on a physiological, biochemical level. Others know where we're at and they mirror it back. And if we are in fear, it doesn't hurt just to admit it. Then we draw the other's compassion. If there's something bothering us, it doesn't hurt to say it. It can be very, very helpful. But all this wonderful balancing act of so many different factors. Just breathe that in nice and slowly. Slow breath out. And I'm just going to say good night. Hope everybody has a good night. I'll let you stay in that state. We'll see you all next week.